want to welcome everyone to Content Strategies for Webinar Success. I'm going to start welcoming our speakers to the stage. They have a wealth of knowledge around webinars, content strategy, webinar programming, pre-event, post-event, all those goodies we're about to jump into. So first off, I want to introduce Ariana from Uber for Business to come up to the stage, share a little bit about yourself, your role, and your favorite fall activity.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay, for having me. It's so nice to be here with everyone. I'm Ariana. I'm a marketing lead here for US Canada at Uber for Business. Uber for Business is all the benefits of Uber reimagined for your business. So whether it's managing business travel, meal programs, rides for your clients or your customers or more, that's what Uber for Business does, all in one dashboard. And my favorite fall activity is going to a music festival in Sacramento called Aftershock. It happens every October, and I look forward to it every year.
Oh, I love it. Any favorite artists that you've seen at that festival? What's the music vibe?
Yes, so music vibe is rock music. So think Guns N' Roses, Kiss, Breaking Benjamin is one of my favorite bands, Avenged Sevenfold, for example. So it's definitely a riotous time.
Oh, I love it. Breaking Benjamin's also a favorite. So love it. All right. So we're going to welcome our second speaker onto the stage now. Stephanie, come join us. She is calling in from Iron Horse today. So Stephanie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your favorite activity.
Hello, thanks, Lindsay. So good to be here. My name is Stephanie. I'm a client engagement manager at Iron Horse. Iron Horse is a B2B marketing agency, so we basically function as an extension of our clients' teams. I am focused on the digital events and webinar side of things, so we help clients with everything from webinar strategy to content and that strategy as well, and then execution of the webinar in their webinar platform. So really excited to talk about webinars. My favorite fall activity, I have to tie it back to football. I am so excited that football is back. I am a huge 49er fan, as Ariana knows. Born and raised in the Bay Area. My family just loves the 49ers. We get together on most Sundays to watch football together, and it's just a really special time for everybody.
I love me some football too, but I will say my team is kind of sad. I'm in the Indianapolis area. I'm a Colts fan. It's been, hey, we had a somewhat good year last year, so I'll take it. We'll see how we do this year. You know, we started off a little rough, but we did beat the Bears. So, you got to take wins when you can get them.
Yes,
well, we're so excited to have both of you here for this fireside chat today about webinar content strategies. You both have a great background in this topic. So I bet there's going to be so much knowledge dropped today. So we want to start off with our first question. So how do webinars fit into your marketing goals? Ariana, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Lindsay. So interestingly, webinars have evolved here at Uber for Business. We previously focused on thought leadership, talking about what's happening in the macro business industry. But as we've continued, we started to focus more on product webinars because we found that our webinars are often influencing the buyers within their buying journey, aka they're already talking with sales and they're seeking to learn more about the product. We also like to use our webinars as a great platform to showcase new products. We have a quarterly product release event that tailors to that. And we also mostly target our database. A lot of our registrants and attendees come from people that already volunteered first-party data, and they're within our email database. We invite them to these webinars, and then they sign up because they're really interested in learning more about all the use cases that Uber for Business can do and understanding the product, because people know Uber, but they often don't know Uber for Business.
Yeah, agree. I think my piece of advice would be to always start off with the question, what do you want to achieve with this piece of content? Because at the end of the day, that's what a webinar is. It's a piece of content that you can use in a lot of different ways. So do you want to educate your audience about something in particular? Do you want to generate leads? Do you want to showcase a product like Ariana was mentioning? Do you want to build authority on a subject? So it really helps to ground yourself in making sure you start off with the outcomes in mind, because that'll kind of lead you down the different paths to other decisions that you want to make along the lines of getting your webinar planned and started. So I think that we think about webinars in a few different ways. We start off with drawing a line in the sand, whether the webinar is going to be mainly thought leadership focused or product focused, again, back to Ariana's point. There are, of course, other different topics and formats for webinars, but this is kind of helpful for us in trying to decide, like, where are we going to focus on in the session? So once you make that initial decision, then you want to look at the format of the session and make sure you're tying it back to your original goals. What do you want the audience to get out of the session? So you could have a fireside chat, which is having a couple experts on your webinar to talk about a certain topic, or if it's something that's a little bit of a meatier subject and it's something like a master class, maybe it's a longer session that's a presentation format with slides. So all these factors are really important to keep in mind at the start of your process when you're thinking through your goals and what you want your audience to come away with after the session, because it's really valuable time that people are spending with your brand. So it helps to kind of ground yourself in those questions at the beginning.
Yeah, and I'll resonate a few things both of you said. So, Stephanie, one thing you brought up was that a webinar is content. And I also want to reiterate that a webinar is video. So I hope everyone watching is keeping that in mind as you're producing your webinar programming and your webinar strategy, so that it's not just content, it is video content, and it's super powerful and impactful video content. So just keep that in your noggin as we're going through. And then Ariana, I want to point out one thing you said, that you all usually tap into your email database to kind of get people into your events. And it just makes me laugh about how people are like, oh, email's dead, or, the whole tracks about like, email not being a good channel, a strong channel anymore. I think definitely we at Goldcast as well have seen a similar impact from our emails list of building that out and the value that has of getting people into your content and building those relationships. So just wanted to hone in on those two thoughts. So next, I want to ask for your thoughts on live versus pre-recorded webinars. I know a lot of people have strong feelings here. They either do one or the other more predominantly. People on the chat, if you have things you want to talk about pre-recorded or live, definitely drop in Q&A. But Ariana, what are your thoughts on the pre-recorded versus live conversation? How do you decide on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lindsay. And like you said, there's certainly strong opinions on both sides of this. We've actually tried both at Uber for Business, a live webinar versus pre-recording. We actually prefer pre-recording. The reason is that I've personally attended webinars where in real time, when they're live, there could be technical difficulties, and sometimes that could compromise the quality of the webinar or result in delays. As registrants and attendees, time is important. All of you watching, all of your time is important. And so I want to make sure that we're delivering the information that you need to know without any risk of technical difficulties while still maintaining, it is still live, but, it is pre-recorded to help eliminate the absence of any technical issues.
Yeah, I think a lot of that anxiety really stems back from 2020, at the height of the pandemic, when everyone was doing virtual events and the load was so heavy on these platforms that we were seeing a lot of difficulties. So I think we're kind of still carrying that in the back of our minds. But I'll echo what Ariana said, pre-recording is also my preference. I think there's a time and place for both methods, but I think pre-recording also takes a lot of pressure off of speakers. So there's a little bit of a safety net because it is live, and getting on a webinar can be a little bit daunting for speakers. So knowing that, we're pre-recording with a week or so before the actual live event can be very helpful for speakers. With that said, even with pre-recorded webinars, there is still, as Ariana mentioned, we are airing them as if they are live. So there is still that potential for something to go wrong. So at Iron Horse, we help our clients by making sure that everything runs smoothly. A lot of times it is if an attendee has a technical difficulty. So for example, they're saying, hey, I can't hear the webinar or I can't see the slides, then we're on and helping them kind of troubleshoot the best practices, what browser are you using, refresh your page, stuff like that, so we can make sure that they're up and running on the webinar and we don't leave a bad taste in their mouth if they were to have a problem with the session that we're hosting. And we're lucky in the sense that we use Goldcast and their support is really, really great. I want to say the SLA is under 60 seconds for support when the session is live. So you know that you're going to get a response super quickly. And at Iron Horse, we have a really strong relationship with Goldcast. We're lucky to have. So we feel really secure and comfortable going into a session that's live too.
And I think one thing to add too, we also have a great relationship with Goldcast, as we do with Iron Horse. And we're a small but mighty team on the Uber for Business marketing side. And as a result, knowing that we could rely on Iron Horse to help make sure that the technical difficulties on the back end are working as expected and acting truly as an extension of our team is hugely helpful. So making sure that our webinars are going off without a hitch while still delivering that valuable content we want to give to our audience.
Yeah. Just to hop in here one more time, Lindsay, another thing that's important to make sure of is your speakers connectivity. So we also make sure to do tech checks with speakers before a session. So regardless if it's live or pre-recorded, we want to make sure that both the speakers are confident that their connection is not going to all of a sudden drop. And also we're confident that the speakers are going to be in a good location to record. It just makes everybody feel a lot more at ease going into the recording day or the live webinar day.
Yes, and that is crucial to success, is to have those speakers feeling calm and confident and ready to present on whatever they're presenting on. So love all those tips. I want to ask kind of one rogue question that might not be on a run of show, but for anyone who hasn't done a pre-recorded webinar before and might want to try it out, any tips or any guidance on that first time? Because it's probably a little different than running something live.
Yeah, I'll take this first, Ariana. I think that what's big for us is really urging with the speakers to pretend like it's live, because I think a lot of times if you're going into a pre-record and there's less stress and pressure, sometimes there's less energy as well. So that could be a con, but we just want to make sure that they're pretending like there's an audience watching, so they keep their energy up. They're practicing active listening. They're nodding their head, smiling as we go, to make sure that it's super engaging for the audience, because we don't want it to come across as a previously recorded session.
Yeah, and I think another piece I'd add, absolutely pretending that it's live, and also just maintaining contact with, with the camera here. I think that's just a general best practice. I think sometimes folks will have a tendency, whether they're referencing some data points and they're looking off to the side, or they're looking at fellow speakers. And I think looking at fellow speakers is right. But when you're actually, presenting and speaking, just a general best practice is, make eye contact with the cameras. That's the other piece I would add.
Yes, 100%. And then going back into the idea of this is video content we're creating, and the better you can make that video content, the better off you will be long term. Because think about all the ways you can use this post webinar too. So great advice there. Love it. So we've talked a little bit about making speakers comfortable. What other advice do you have around ensuring your speakers have the best experience or comfortable presenting on your webinars?
Certainly. I'll take this first, Steph. I think whether it's a pre-recording or it's live, one thing that I would recommend is starting, of course, with making the ask to the speakers. For me, being at an enterprise organization at Uber, we're 30,000 employees globally. Many of us have a lot to do. There's also odds are that not all of us know each other. So how do you get people to basically carve out time to be a speaker at your webinar? What I do is I actually have a template I use that I created to how to make the webinar speaking ask as clear and concise as possible. In your Docs tab over in Goldcast, I actually offered it as a Word document. You guys are welcome to download it and use it for your webinar speaking requests if that's at all helpful. The idea with how I crafted the message is you want to anticipate any and all questions that you would get in this initial message. This also helps instill confidence that the speaker that you're making the ask of, they feel confident in you, that you're going to carry them through this webinar process or virtual event process and help them look as best as they deserve to be. Steph, anything to add?
Yeah, I will just encourage everybody to download that template, because I can attest, I use it after I saw it from Ariana. I was like, this is perfect. Because I think you want to take away as much murkiness in the process as you can. So I feel like sometimes my middle name is over communicating. So webinars can be really daunting for speakers, like I mentioned, and not everybody feels comfortable doing them or public speaking, or maybe just aren't used to it yet, because I think that speaking on webinars is kind of a muscle that you have to strengthen over time. So the more you communicate with speakers, the more information you give them up front, and the more lead time you give them to, one, ask questions, and two, review the content, get comfortable with what the ask is, the better. And while Iron Horse and Uber for Business, we partner on a lot of the content and the outline for the session and the deck and all of the copy. While we're working through all those things, we also share those assets with the speakers, not in their final form, just in their work in progress form. So they feel like they're brought along with the process. We encourage them to add notes, add color, really make the copy their own. So when they go into the session, it can feel super natural and they feel like they had a stake in the game going into it.
Yeah. And again, being whatever size organization you're at, but particularly as you get to larger organizations, think over 1,000 employees or even bigger, helping people feel involved and brought along on the process, like Stephanie does by sharing with our speakers, here's what the deck is going to look like, here's what the outline is going to look at, etc., helps them feel involved in the process. And then we all get to celebrate the wins when the webinar performs successfully. So definitely couldn't agree more on over communication.
Yeah, and I think something that's also really, really important with their speakers, and it's something that we didn't always do at the beginning, but once we started doing it, we have never looked back, is having a dry run with the speakers. So that's about a week prior to the session, and we usually do it a day or two before the pre-record just so it's fresh. But it's basically running the session from start to finish as if we were to hit record, but we're not really hitting record. So it's helpful for both the speakers and for us on the admin side for seeing, okay, how is the session flowing? Is there anything we're missing? Are we running long? Are we running short? Sometimes it becomes a really collaborative process as well. I know a couple weeks ago we were doing this with Ariana and a speaker group, and there was one part of the session that just didn't really seem to be working. So we reworked that live during the dry run, updated the deck, updated the outline, and everybody felt much more comfortable going into the session. So it just takes stress off of all parties involved to kind of know what you're going into before you go into that recording. So it's super helpful.
Yeah. And the other piece too is, first of all, shout out to college professors that creating content for a 30-minute webinar, a 60-minute webinar, or in their case, a 60-minute lecture, it's a lot of work. And one thing that we have found in our dry runs, to what Stephanie was saying, is sometimes the net of how long our content takes is 20 minutes out of a 30-minute webinar. Then yes, that leaves more time for Q&A, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're delivering sufficient information within the 30 minutes that folks are committing to us. So dry runs certainly help us, like Stephanie said, with making sure that the content is flowing and also that we have sufficient content to meet the run time that we're asking folks to give us. The other piece I'd also add, so kind of shifting back to thinking about speaking and speakers and helping them feel comfortable, is after running dozens of webinars, you also start to pick up who's a good speaker and who's a natural and who's an expert. So after the webinar recording goes well and everyone's feeling that post-recording high or post-live webinar high, I feel like that's a great moment to ask speakers if they'd like to be part of webinars again. This allows you to create a bench of speakers. And so the benefit is that it's less requests to people that may not know you. And also, you can also start to build webinar content and ideas around that bench of speakers' expertise.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so huge. And something that happened to us last webinar recording, Ariana, that I actually haven't brought up with you yet, but one of the speakers asked if you had any specific feedback for him after the session, like constructive feedback, because he wanted to get better at speaking. So I thought that was so cool and something good to keep in mind, because these speakers, a lot of these people do want to continue to speak at webinars and kind of showcase their expertise. So the speaker bench, speaker profiles are super important. We list, what speakers are good at speaking about, what their subject matter expertise is, what past webinars they've spoken on, and we include links to them. So this becomes like something that you can look at. So say Ariana picks the topic for her webinar and she's thinking, who is going to be my speaker for this session? She doesn't have to pull out the org chart, go back to the drawing board to kind of look for who's going to be a good fit. She can pull up her speaker bench and profiles and say, Lindsay is great at content. Let's ask her to join our next webinar. So it's super helpful.
Yeah. And certainly, and I think the last thing is, I feel like we could talk about, making our speakers comfortable all day. But I think the last thing I'll say is giving kudos, I think, is quite critical. Again, when you're in larger organizations, recognition is so key for making people feel seen and appreciated. So after our webinars, what I like to do is I'll post in high visibility forums, whether that's Slack channel, your formal feedback tool, things like that. So that way our speakers have it as a point of reference for them going above and beyond their scope by helping marketing something that has great benefits for the business. And we also send them short blurbs on LinkedIn for them to post on LinkedIn because we want them to get their personal brand out there. Like Stephanie was saying, that one speaker that was asking for more feedback so we could do more webinars in the future. That's great. His speaking at our next webinar is going to be his first foray into starting to build that personal brand, and giving them free written LinkedIn text and the URL to the registration page helps put them as a thought leader on their LinkedIn profiles, which is super nice.
Yeah, it's great because they really are volunteering their time and their busy schedules to help with this. So although we do try and make it as easy as possible for them by giving them all the tools, they are volunteering their time. And so we want to make it as mutually beneficial as possible.
Yeah, and I'll add a few things onto that too from some things that we've seen work. One thing, kind of going into that appreciation and building your profile and getting yourself out there. One thing I always offer to speakers is if you're a Goldcast customer, you have Content Lab embedded within Goldcast. I always offer my speakers, there's a specific clip that you love or like a talk track that you want a clip of from that event. Let me know and I can get you that clip for you. So that has worked really well too, I think, as an appreciation token to speakers, especially some people I feel like are very specific on what they want to share and what clips they want clipped out. So it's always nice to offer that up to people. And it's so easy. I can do it in like a minute. So it's not a heavy lift at all. And then another thing, like when you're talking about that speaker bench and creating that, one thing I always love to do too is once a webinar is done, asking, hey, do you have any referrals of people who might want to speak at a Goldcast event? Because you've already created like trust and authority with these people. And then they have people in their network who are friendly. So they're like, oh yeah, I'll recommend, Sue to come speak with y'all. So great tips there. You're right. We could talk about how to make speakers comfortable all day, but we only have so much time. So our next question is going to go into length of sessions. So what do you all think is the ideal length for a webinar session? Ariana, we'll start with you.
Yeah, great question. And speaking of, we only have so much time. I think, at Uber for Business, we used to do 60-minute webinars. This was especially common during the pandemic when we were all, living off of Zoom. But that said, I think for us to be smarter with both our speakers' time and our time as well as our audience's time, we started focusing on 30-minute webinars. As I was mentioning earlier with the heroes that are college professors and them creating, 60-minute lectures on a regular basis, you can still get a lot of content out in 10 to 15 minutes. But I think a lot of us are used to 30-minute meetings. So that's why we tend to simulate our webinars to take a similar amount of time. Steph, what do you think?
Yeah, I am also on the camp of shorter the better. I do think that it depends on, again, going back to your marketing goals and what you want to achieve in this session. But we too have been kind of leaning towards the 30-minute mark for webinars. And to your point about speakers, it's also a very different ask if you're asking a speaker to speak on an hour webinar versus a 30-minute webinar. An hour can sometimes feel a bit daunting, but one example I wanted to bring up about a shorter webinar is something that we do at Iron Horse. It's our webinar program called our coffee breaks. And this program started off as the intent was it to be a super short, snackable pieces of content once a month, 15, 20-minute sessions. Sometimes they extend to 30, but we really wanted it to be a space and time for people to grab a cup of coffee, take a break from work, and spend a little bit of time with us and learn something new. And that has resonated really well because, again, you don't have to block off a huge chunk of your schedule because I know, as we all know, we're all super busy, have lots of meetings going on. So it's nice when you can kind of sprinkle in some short learnings with your audience if that's something that resonates well with them.
Yeah, meetings are definitely the name of the game here at Uber. So also being like really intentional with folks' time is something that comes to mind for us a lot. We've also seen with our own webinars that people tend to stick with us for about 25 minutes. And beyond that, data shows that people's average attention span with webinars ranges from 10 to 20 minutes. So just food for thought when it comes to thinking about the length of your webinars.
Yeah, I will double click on that one because we're actually about getting ready to launch our 2024 webinar benchmark report. And one of our findings was the average drop off time is about like 30 minutes when you look across our data set. But one thing that was really fascinating, that's a little like off Richter from kind of where our conversation is going, is we've actually seen a growth in webinars being 60 minutes or more, which I thought was really fascinating. I think the number was like 15% of the webinars we reviewed, which was like, I think over 6,000 webinars. So a lot of content, 15% of them are doing 60 minutes or more, which I thought was fascinating. But again, I think going back to the start of this conversation, it's all about your business goals and what the point of your content is. So always keep that in mind. So we've talked about session length. So now I want to talk about topics. How do you pick topics based on your audience's need? Ariana, what are your thoughts here?
Yes. So I personally, as a marketer, I think it's balancing between what we want to say as a company versus what your audience actually wants to hear, or even how they want to hear from you. So some things that we keep in mind, B2B is human too. Nobody wants to be sold to. It also doesn't have to be stuff you're boring. So that's something we keep in mind when it comes to the creativity of the topics that we choose, and also the presentation format that we deliver them in. Tying back to what Stephanie was saying earlier, whether it's fireside chats, whether it's, live demos, whether it's, your typical presentation with a slideshow format, things like that.
Yeah, agreed. I always come back to the question, if you're wondering what your audience wants to hear about, you should ask them. So we really live and breathe that every day. So for our webinars, we ask during the post-webinar survey, what do you want to hear about next from us? So we do this both for our Iron Horse webinars and also for Uber for Business. And really, it's been really great to have a running list of topics that the audience is hungry for. So Ariana and I will go back to this list really often and see if there's anything we can kind of bubble up to the surface for a future webinar. We also, so that's post-event, but also pre-event, you can ask your registrants. We include a field on the form, the registration form, that asks, what questions do you have for our speakers? So it could be on a certain topic, the topic of that said webinar. And that is really great insight into the webinar as you're creating it along the way, right? So you can kind of sprinkle in some of those questions to the session if it's applicable. If it's not directly applicable to that session, we can add it to our running list of other ideas and questions from the audience. So you can get really good insights from your audience base. They have a lot of great ideas, and you can add that to your running list.
And a shout out to the Iron Horse team as well. Like what Stephanie was saying, whether it's a post-webinar survey or when folks are registering, asking them if they have any questions for our speakers, that was testament to their expertise. I actually hadn't even thought of that, but I thought it was a brilliant addition because I'm very data driven. So taking into account what people are saying pre or post webinar on what they want to hear, what their questions are, also keeping in mind what's happening in the market. And of course, what are our customers asking us about? What are they saying? Keeping all those three elements in mind help inform the webinar content strategy that we create together year over year.
Yep. Agreed. And I think that you can always kind of think back to what unique point of view does your company have on a specific topic that's really hot in the market or in your specific industry. Those can kind of give you some good ideas of jumping off points of different webinar topics as well.
Yeah, and one we have done ourselves is in your reminder emails for your event, put in a line that says, hey, do you have questions about XYZ topic? Email it to, Lindsay@goldcast.io. And I think that does two things there. It builds rapport between whoever is your webinar programming person or whoever your host or moderator is, building that relationship, but then also like opening that channel of conversation, like you all said, with your audience. So love that advice. And also, if you have any Q&A to ask of Ariana or Stephanie, please drop that in the Q&A tab. We will have some time at the end if we need it. We're going to get into our next next question now, and that is talking about investments. So we all know that you have to have some investments to run a webinar program. You can't just do it with zero budget because it takes times and tools and technology and all those fun things. So Ariana, what's your perspective on how you stretch your investment with webinars?
Yeah, well, I have a couple of thoughts. For my situation, being in US, Canada on Uber for Business, even though we're in an enterprise org, we're still a small but mighty team. And there's often a lot of competing priorities. And our webinars are strong content. They're also video content, as you were mentioning, Lindsay. So I believe that they should be aired more often, especially considering all the work that goes into them, like you were saying. Therefore, I'm actually quite a big fan of re-airs. Sometimes I'll re-air a piece of content or a webinar rather. I'll re-air a webinar a few months after it initially premiered. Why? Because odds are that the original distribution list, and again, in my case, I'm hitting my email database, odds are they don't remember the original webinar that I was promoting a few months back. And it could help bring in new leads into that webinar topic if they didn't see the original email a few months back, especially if you're generating new leads since that original email went out, or that webinar invite rather. The other piece, which is something I think we all know very well as marketers, is that not many people absorb the message the first time you tell them something. So resharing that webinar content, having them reinforce the same message or maybe framed a little bit differently will continue to help land the message more and more the more that they are exposed to it.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think that working with a lot of different companies, sometimes budget constraints do come up and re-airs are more budget friendly. You put a ton of time and energy into creating a webinar. Webinars are a lot of work, so why not get as much out of them as you can? I know, Lindsay, you will probably bring up video repurposing because that's a super important topic on this question. But I think that when you're thinking about re-airs, you want to think about how to position them. So the first is, like Ariana mentioned, and something that Uber for Business has seen a ton of success with, is positioning it as a net new webinar, which is great. You can also position it and use it at the kind of FOMO angle, like you missed out on this great webinar, as a driver to create excitement and kind of intrigue into the topic. So with that, you can use actual quotes from the session, some memorable moments. You can use clips using Content Lab to clip up the session and promote the session prior to the re-air with some of those really salient moments from the session. And there's also some lower effort, and of course, lower effort always needs a little bit of a grain of salt attached to it, but there's some lower effort sessions that you can do as well to kind of stretch your webinar investment. And that's the no slides kind of casual conversations, similarly to what we're doing today. And Einhorst does this as well with their webinar coffee break program, but really let your SMEs be SMEs. So make this a super low lift for everybody involved. Use your speaker bench to select speakers that you know are super strong and won't really need a lot of oversight or scripting done for them. So that can kind of mitigate some of the really big lift that some webinars take.
Yeah, and I think too, people sleep on re-airs. I see so few organizations do re-airs. We have done a few over the years, and I always am amazed by how powerful they can be, but how few people actually do them. So for anyone in the audience who might be interested in doing a re-air, kind of a similar question, any pointers, advice there to be thinking about if they're doing a re-air for the first time?
I could start with this stuff. One thing I think about, which again came with collaboration with Iron Horse, I truly can't say how much I love working with them, is reposition the webinar. So don't use the same title, don't use the same description, rewrite it. You can frame it as a brand new event. Hey, this webinar is premiering on July 26th, for example. What we found in my experience, granted, it's a limited experiment, so take that into consideration, is we tried positioning webinars as a re-air. Hey, this is a brand new topic with a different description, but in reality, it's the same content. Or, hey, catch this webinar on demand and catch this webinar on demand. It's the same one for a few months ago. And which performed better? The re-air version did. Because again, redundancy, people don't often recognize things the first time they see it. But if things continue to seem net new, then that will attract attention, that gets more registrants. And so that's what we do when it comes to the re-air strategy.
Yeah, totally agree. Refresh that promo copy, you pull in, something that's happening in the market that's more current than when the session originally aired, just to put a little bit of a freshness veneer on top of it.
Yeah, I love it because obviously we as a brand talk a lot about repurposing and using your video content strategically and thoughtfully and getting the most out of that investment. And man, now I'm like, my brain is spinning of like, I need to go make some content about re-airs. So Ariana, Stephanie, I might be reaching back out to you all for some expertise in this area. Well, we are coming to the end of our webinar today. Want to do one last ask if anyone has any questions they want to ask. So a few moments if you want to throw those in the chat or the Q&A tab. But while I'm waiting to see if there are any final questions, Ariana, Stephanie, kind of just to close us out, why webinars? Like, why do they work? Why have you invested a lot of your time and career and expertise into doing webinar programming?
I think of webinars as temple moments. So in marketing, particularly in B2B marketing and in demand, events are huge, whether they're in-person trade shows or they're virtual events like webinars. It seems to be a great way to continue to get to know your business, get to meet people from your business and put a face behind the name. Because again, B2B people are human too, whether we're working at the company or we're working with you to partner with your organization. And that is why I continue to invest in webinars. And like I said, for us, people will often engage with our webinars when they're already talking with an Uber business representative. But it's like they're wanting to get to know us more, very understandably so. And so continuing to see that our audience and our large database resonates with webinars in that way is something that I'm going to keep in my strategy, definitely for the next year and hopefully for years to come.
Yeah, I'll just add that webinars work. I mean, they're super versatile as a channel. They do not have to be boring. You can create excitement. You can make them interesting, engagement. There's tons of different tactics that we could go on and on about there. But webinars can take so many different shapes and forms and formats. That they're I love the versatility of them. I think that's the number one point.
Yeah, and Steph, you just reminded me of with webinars too, it is also tailoring how does your audience enjoy consuming content. I'm a visual learner, right? Like I actually am a fan of ours. I too register for webinars because I'm a visual learner. It's time I'm setting aside my day to learn, so I'm already getting that benefit from it. But with the beauty of the Content Lab, for example, now you have this great video content, you have this long form content, you can create short clips for your social media, for your email blasts, for example. But then some people like to read. Some people are reading learners. So then you're able to take the webinar content you created, put it in Content Lab, spit out a blog post or an article or a key takeaways follow-up email, and then you're able to meet those folks and their preferences if they prefer to read things versus watching things. So it's all about the versatility and meeting the unique preferences of your audience.
Yeah, something that's great also, we're just getting excited about this, Lindsay. with the new on-demand experience with Goldcast, the on-demand page, so the video sits on the page. You can include 3 key takeaways. You have those snippets from the session. If someone doesn't have the 30 minutes to spend with your on-demand content, maybe they want to learn, what about one specific Uber product that we covered. So they can do that as well. So getting back to where do we meet our attendees? How do we meet our attendees where they are and how they like give them a lot of different options to do that.
Yes. And then, like Stephanie said, I am getting excited about this, and I promise it's unpaid promotion. I don't recommend things lightly. But what I will say is, previously we were using a Goldcast competitor, and one of the reasons why we moved to Goldcast for Uber for Business was, again, that idea of the derivative content that could come from the Content Lab. There were a few reasons as well. I needed to more proactively notify my sales team of engagement with webinars. We found sizable 6-figure deals come in simply from registering for webinars. Even that could indicate sufficient intent for that someone's ready for a conversation. on the side, so in addition to proactively notifying my sales team of engagement with things like virtual events, the other piece is, again, small but mighty. I feel like that's just the label of my team. So how do we create content, extrapolate more of the richness that comes from webinars and the rich material into other formats to continue to educate people in the way they prefer to be educated. So the content lab, this was something that was unique to Goldcast. I didn't see many other competitors with this feature, so I was really interested in that. The third piece is, again, tying back to whether it's B2B, B2C, marketing doesn't have to be boring. And as such, the interface and the platform for hosting webinars, we want to bring it up to 2024 standards. It doesn't have to look like a website that came out of 2004. We all remember what those look like. So, certainly the modern interface as well was something I had considered in my decision to move into Goldcast. So, like I said, I think finding the right platform that could serve multiple jobs to be done is definitely something to take into consideration if you're going to strengthen or amplify your webinar program.
Wow, what a cherry on top y'all gave me there. I love it. Well, Ariana, Stephanie, thank you so much for spending time talking about your webinar content strategies today and just all of your perspectives, all of your experience. It was super valuable. Even I learned so much today, and I feel like I do a lot of webinars in this role. So I love that you could share so much. Again, if anyone's watching and you want to learn more about Goldcast, click that button that get more out of webinars, because you just heard Ariana and Stephanie talk about how great Goldcast is, and I'll toot our own horn, toot. It is pretty awesome. You're here right now, you see it. So Ariana, Stephanie, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you for sharing so many great things, and we just are so grateful you took some time today with us. Great. Hello. If there's any audience still checking us out, we actually do have some Q&A we want to cover. So I am going to pick up some of our Q&A that I accidentally missed off, but we want to be able to capture these questions and snip them in Content Lab and send them to the viewers who submitted them. So here we go. Okay, so Rachel is sharing. Let's share this actually on stage for this. So Rachel wants to know any tactics for on-demand promotion.
Yeah, I'll start with this one. Basically, what we do with on demand is once a webinar has aired, subsequently we'll send an HTML email that is saying, hey, we wait until the webinar airs to write this email. Here's some clips from the webinar. Here's some quotes from the webinar. If you missed it, here's a link to go watch it. And then we'll send it off to that same email database, of course, excluding folks that already registered and attended. We've seen this. We've only done this just once recently. We saw it boost 10 to 20% in on-demand attendance. So we look forward to continuing to optimize this over time. Stephanie, anything else?
Yeah, I will add to make sure you include social in your on-demand promotion. So using those clips from Content Lab, repurposing for social to kind of get more eyeballs on the on-demand session. I think also it's really great to include your webinars in different channels as well. So I know Ariana does this with some of her nurtures. She'll include a webinar in a nurture series, or in other channels where you can kind of just get more traction from the webinar and get more people to watch it and consume the content.
Awesome. So we have one coming in from Lee Ann. We'll share this on stage. I'm wondering what kind of promo emails you're sending out. Are you using graphics, video? What kind of copy, content, informative, short and simple? What kind of promotional emails are you using?
Ooh, good question. So I'll jump in here, Ariana, for us on our behalf. We have been doing plain text emails for promotional emails. We started off with HTML. We weren't seeing a ton of great traction. So as kind of a test, we switched over to the plain text email from Ariana herself. So it comes from an email that looks like Ariana is sending it out. And that has resonated really great with her audience. Now, other audiences may be different, so you might want to kind of test this out. But short and sweet, really simple, has been really great for promo emails, and that has seemed to be resonating a lot.
And one more thing to add, couldn't agree more that plain text emails seem to be working really well for us. So curious if it will work well for you all. I also have to say that it's from Ariana from Uber for Business Marketing.
Mm.
Sometimes, folks receiving the email, they think I'm a contact representative. And I think marketing is more behind the scenes than my sales counterparts. So even having that distinct qualifier, whether it's in your from name or your signature, hopefully could help, clarify for folks that you're just marketing saying hello and not a different representative coming to pitch them.
Yep.
And kind of a follow-up question to what Leanne had asked. How long do you promote and how many promos are you sending? This is a great question. I feel like this comes up all the time with webinars.
Yeah, Steph, I want to start with this, and I'm curious what Iron Horse does. What we did a few years ago was we only did 2 webinar sends pre-event, so 2 weeks. So we send it once a week, up to 2 weeks before the webinar live event, and then we would have the webinar. And so the second email will go out 1 week prior. Then when Iron Horse came aboard, they actually gave us the great idea of sending a third email a day before the webinar, because often we find a lot of last minute people will sign up. So, and currently our promotion strategy is about 3 weeks prior to the webinar live date, with the third email going out 1 day before the webinar live date. But Steph, what do you guys do on Iron Horse?
Yeah, we do something very similar. So I like to try and get registration launched a month-ish before the session, just so we're ready. And then at that 3-week mark, we usually send our first promotional email. We like to send 3. And to your point, Ariana, we like to get the last minute people with the day before. We've also tested day of, sending a promo email morning of, but we've seen more success with the day before email. So, and then of course, social promotion sprinkled in throughout there the 3 weeks before.
Yeah, and I'll say that's about, generally speaking, for our kind of single session webinars, what we would follow. And then if you're running any kind of larger virtual events, what I like to do is do 1 email promoting each session. Usually we'll start promoting about 6 weeks ahead of time to give enough space for that. So that's kind of like the differentiation there between like your single session webinar and your larger virtual event. And also using your emails to drive any giveaways and contests. That's another thing we like to do to try to engage people, throw a little bit of a giveaway in there and give them a little incentive to sign up and attend live. So that was one other one that we always like. So I think that covered our Q&A. Is there any other Q&A that we wanted to answer today, either Stephanie or Ariana, anything that kind of jumped out there?
Let's see.
Oh, wait, actually, Leanne, you are still here. Oh, my goodness. Hello. I'm so happy to see that. She actually just submitted another one. So Leanne is, oh my gosh, I love this. So Leanne asked, which social platform have you been able to track / see registrations from?
Question master over here. Social platform, do you mean like social media, like a LinkedIn, Leanne, or yes? Okay. So we attach UTMs to our registration links. So for social posts, the reg link will have a UTM attached to it, and we can track the registrants that are being captured through that LinkedIn link in Goldcast's backend. So Goldcast will tell us where that traffic came from, if it came from promo email 1 versus 3, or if it came from a LinkedIn push or a paid social push. So we look at all that information within Goldcast itself.
Oh, Ariana, you got anything to add on that one?
No, Stephanie pretty much covered it.
Cool. And I'll say one thing we have found very successful is doing ad placements in newsletters of other organizations, of other brands. That's been super successful for us as well. And then one last one I see in here that I'm always interested in is any tactics for on-demand promotion. So any tips, tricks, pointers on boosting those on-demand views? Because like we said, video is important and you should care about your webinar just as much as when it's on demand as it is live.
Yeah, definitely. I'll jump in here, Ariana, and just point to social. I think social is a really powerful avenue for on-demand promotion, taking those clips like we talked about, promoting them, having your speakers promote them as well on their socials after the fact, and then including your webinars into different activations as well, helps to kind of further your on-demand asset.
Yeah, you can link to your webinars in a content library. You can link to webinars on a blog article. You can link to webinars in a dedicated email nurture, for example. So definitely, like Steph said, taking this asset and then applying it across your various channel distributions.
And I will say one thing now you can do with Goldcast and our smart events is you can actually embed your webinar into your content. So whether it's gated or ungated, you can use it either way. But that is a great way to boost that on-demand views instead of just linking to your external page or another page, embedding it directly in the content. Well, anyways, y'all, well, this was fun. I'm so glad we saw that Q&A. It somehow snuck by me. I'm having a long week post inbound, y'all. So appreciate all the questions that came in. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Ariana, for jumping in and answering them. We super appreciate it. But now we're really going to say goodbye this time.
Thanks, Leanne, if you're still here.
Yes, thanks, Leanne. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay, for having us. Thank you, everyone, for watching.